There's more to life than just this, making as much as you possibly can, working thousands of hours a week.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 45 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
Hello and welcome to the show. How about that music? I want to thank Dave and Colin from the band Mustard Plug for letting us use their song, Mr. Smiley. I think it really sets the right tone for all of the exciting and fun interviews that we have lined up for you. So today we have our third episode ever, and our release pattern is designed to coincide with the RPOA annual conference, which is happening right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, this Thursday through Sunday, February 25th through the 28th of 2016. So we are starting out on this Monday with 3 brand new episodes, and then a brand new episode will come out Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, leading right into the start of the conference. After that, you can expect a new episode every Monday, each one with an exciting and informative interview. So today, for our third episode ever, I am so excited to be sitting down and talking with Justin Workman. On the surface, Justin seems to be a rehabber and a buy and hold investor in the Middleville, Caledonia area, which is just outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan. But in reality, Justin is employing some very creative investing strategies that have allowed him to transition from his job to full-time investor owner. 5 years ago, Justin and his wife lost everything in a devastating fire. Today, you'll find out how he was able to bounce back stronger and smarter than ever. We should probably start with is just the type of investing you do and your investment philosophy.
Yeah, that sounds good. Basically, I am a rehabber, I guess is the best way to describe me. I do a bunch of buy and hold as well, but I do a lot of rehab. I look at ways to add value to different properties and other investments that I do get into along the way. It really depends on what the investment it is and what direction we're going with that particular one. So it varies quite a bit.
Tell me, like, where are you investing and what types of properties? I know you're doing single families for the most part, but tell me where and what, because it's not just single families, it's a very specific type of single family.
Yeah. What I get into a lot is I get into single families, but I stay very close to home. I live kind of between Caledonia and Middleville, and I stay within a 15-minute radius of home. I worked out of town for a number of years, etc. So when I was working, I wanted to be able to quick zip by, take care of things, do showings, etc. as I wanted to do that. And with that, it gives me a wide variety of price points within that 15-mile range. So it works out very well. And the single families that I normally look for are kind of the worst of the worst. I don't buy a lot of just cosmetic rehabbers. I think that's too much. There's too much competition for the regular end buyer to get into that. I look for the stuff that's really bad, really beat up, been vacant for years. You know, the normal foreclosure stuff that everybody goes after. But it's on the worst end normally is what I'm really after.
Worse end, but not necessarily in bad neighborhoods, though.
No. Right? No, these are good neighborhoods. I do a lot of the middle to high end neighborhoods as well with that. What I'm looking to do, I do a lot of lease option type of sales, I guess.
So you mean after you fix them up?
After we fix them up and rehab them. Yep, we do a lease option with a potential buyer. And what we get into is I kind of target the keeping up with the Joneses crowd. I look for those that are high income earners and very high spenders.
And these are people who you would place in your house on a lease option. And so there's 2 strategies we're talking about here.
Yeah.
One is you're basically rehabbing the worst of the worst properties
in the good neighborhoods.
In the good neighborhoods.
Yep.
And so let's focus on that for a moment.
Okay.
Do you go in and do the work yourself? Do you have a crew? I mean, what's that look like?
It depends on the house and what's going on. I am a licensed residential builder, so I pull the overall building permit. I kind of enjoy doing some of the demo and framing just because most of the houses that we buy have usually a funky layout, have something a little awkward about them. A lot of times we're adding baths, we're moving kitchens. So if I get in and do the demo, it gives me some quality time in the house to kind of figure out the layout and the overall design. And it really doesn't take me that long to do the demo and frame out.
So just Justin Workman alone in the house?
Yeah, exactly. Alone in the house for about a week. And just kind of
all wondering, what's this guy doing in there? Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Let the dumpster show up and just start toting stuff out sometimes. No, I do occasionally get some hourly help just to do stuff if it's overwhelming, if it's really bad. But most of the time it's very basic. And, what I'm really after is just what all walls can I open up and what can I open up and where are the systems of the house located currently and kind of where can I fill and add. And I don't know. I've gone both ways. I've subbed out that portion before, and it's just never turned out as well as I would have liked. So that's kind of why I continue to do that part of it. The majority of the other work all gets subbed out. The electrician, plumber, HVAC, I can't do. I'm not a licensed contractor, so I need to sub out those portions through the building permit process for sure. When it comes to the carpentry work, the trim, the tile, the floor, I can do that stuff. I just prefer not to. The guys that do it every day do such a nice job and are so much better and faster than I will ever be. It's easier just to sub it out. You get a nicer finished product at the end of the day, and it cuts a lot of time out of the schedule too when you can kind of overlap multiple guys in a project. So.
And you have guys that you work with all the time that you trust?
Yeah, it varies. Not every house is the same. You try to keep some of them the same, but I usually have a few contractors in each area that I typically like to work with that have, we've worked with before, they've done a good job. But it does vary. Some projects just will not meet the schedule of another guy, so you can't use them. An electrician, the one you'd like to use is 4 weeks out and you need it in 2 weeks. You've got to be able to find somebody else. And especially at this point in time, contractors are very, very busy in the Grand Rapids area. There's none of them that are out there desperate looking for work anymore like it was a couple years ago. I mean, a couple years ago, you could call, they'd show up that day if you wanted them to and do work because they had nothing else going on. It was few and far between, and it was hard to come by work. So today, it's a different story. They're all loaded up with work. You've got to schedule them weeks and weeks out. So it does vary. And it's one of those things that if you get somebody to do the rough-in on a house, they've got to do the finish on the house because they pull the permit. So you've got to work both ends of the spectrum as far as when you're going to be here for the rough-in side and then, come back in another month and do the finish out, et cetera. So you've got to work through that and work through that with them. Also, it varies too, especially with the finish work. Some guys finish better than others. There are guys that do better at trim work. They cost a little bit more money. So you're not going to use them on a $100,000 house, but you'll use them on a $300,000-$400,000 house. So it does vary, just the level of quality. It really depends on what you're after, what the particular house is, and kind of what your timeline is. If you can wait, if you can't wait, and who you like to work with makes a big difference in these projects.
So if there were TV cameras watching you during that period, would it look exactly like what you see on HGTV?
Not exactly. I'm different. I float around every day, so depends on how many projects I have going. But I stop in, and I usually take care of a lot of miscellaneous odds and ends, stuff that gets forgot, stuff that gets missed, stuff that needs to happen, just sweeping up floors, etc. Trying to help these guys out, do whatever I can. But the overall drama factor really doesn't exist. Like HGTV and all the flip shows.
You're not finding things out at the last minute that you have termites?
No, after the kitchen's done, you didn't find out that there's a heat duct in the way of the plumbing. I mean, and you can tell based on the TV shows and the way they edit that that's not the origination of how they found this out and how they corrected the problem if you look carefully enough. In the early stages when you're doing your rough work, what's going to be in the way, what's wrong, what's good and bad. So that added layer of drama really doesn't exist. And the nice thing is I'm able to float around to these other projects, so I can be there to solve some of the short intermediate problems that we do come across. And for the most part, it's a minor adjustment. It's not a major, oh no, we've got to tear off a whole part of the house because, yeah, the foundation was bad and we didn't know about it after everything's been complete.
You know what to look for going in, and usually, are you saying that usually any surprises are found in the beginning stage?
Yeah, they are, and that's another reason why I like to work on them a little bit more in the beginning stages, is I can find more of those things out. If there are issues, you can usually kind of find them out when you're demoing some of the stuff, or when you're pulling up floors, or when you get the electrical and plumber and HVAC guy in, you can find out a lot of the other issues that you're going to face as you go down the road, and kind of what you can correct and at different points and parts, what you need to adjust, what you need to fix. It really helps out. The more you're there, the more you come to find out about the house and figure out the intricacies of how it works, how it functions. So it's unique, but you really don't come across any major life-changing, issues as you go through. You usually know ahead of time what you're going to face and what you're going to get into.
Wouldn't it be valuable if the RPOA had a course on doing just what you described?
It would be very valuable, especially a course that covers how to determine a market area, how to find a market, to figure out where that market is as far as what kind of income they generate, what they will generate, where houses should sell at, being able to calculate and estimate your repair costs, figuring out how to deal with contractor subs, learning about the permitting process. It would be extremely valuable.
You should teach a course like
that. Yeah, we are. The RPOA is going to offer a course. It is going to be, I believe we've decided on 3 nights. I think it's going to happen in April. And we're going to go through all of that. If you want to learn how to rehab, if you've rehabbed a few and you want to learn more information, we're really going to dive into that. That topic of, how to pick a house out to begin with, and what to look for, and what just kind of getting to know the market, the area, the house, and how to figure out what to build. Does this house require granite countertop? Does it require laminate? I mean, just simple things like that make a big difference in the scope of work and how much you're going to make on the property. It really, I think, is beneficial. We're going to combine a lot of other stuff in that as well. We've got 3 nights to go through, but I think for somebody that wants to get into the rehab portion or into the flipping business, I think it would be very advantageous for them to show up. I'm going to show up and teach for 3 nights, so that'll be entertaining, I'm sure. But also we will go hopefully and do a site visit for a house. We'll be able to go walk through, kind of look at what I normally look at. And then we're going to run the numbers on it. We're going to see where you can buy that house at, what the purchase price needs to be before it makes sense and makes a deal. So
it's a fantastic class. I know I've seen you describe it to the board members at the RPOA, and I think it's so valuable to learn how to do what you're describing from someone who's done it and someone who does it very well and has been successful at it. And that's why I'm glad you're teaching that course.
Yeah, and I think it'll be helpful to find somebody that's local that does it, and I'm somewhat willing to share. I don't think I'm too abrasive. I'm somewhat easy to talk to, I feel like. And, and I'm not afraid to share things with you, the good, the bad, or the ugly, as you go through these processes, and kind of help some people out, because I see a lot of people today that get into it, especially right now. There's a big push to flip houses, and I can make a lot of money. And you just see them make very easy mistakes, especially when you get into it, as far as doing things extremely cheap and just the house sitting on the market forever and not selling because the finish level isn't right, or going above and beyond where they put, extremely nice finishes and appliances, etc., in a house that doesn't deserve quite that level of finish out. So there's a fine line of what is expected and what isn't expected, what's too nice and what's not nice enough, and it's hard to find that balance. And
yeah, you have to really know the neighborhood, you have to know the market, you have to know what the houses nearby are like.
Yeah, exactly. And that comes down to the research portion that we'll really get into the first night of the class, is what neighborhood are you targeting? And it's different for everybody. But I don't know how you could ever target every neighborhood that's listed on the GRAR the GRAR website. The whole greater Grand Rapids area is such an overwhelming market. Street to street, house prices vary a lot, and I don't know those niches myself. So that's why I've chosen to target very close to home. I can understand the niche. I understand the market. I'm involved in some of the local areas where I know the politics, what's going on, where it's getting developed, who's moving in, who's moving out. I think that's really advantageous to me, and I think to others as well. They've got to understand that it's a bigger system out there that you've got to start to understand and be a part of. It's not one house. It's the whole community that really adjusts the price point of that house.
Absolutely. Real estate is local. You have to know what's going on in the neighborhood and the community at large. Let's go down that the discussion path of the first real estate strategy, which is really kind of a buy and hold. So you buy something that needs major repairs. It's the worst of the worst. You go in, you fix it up, you make it really nice, and then what do you do? Yeah.
What I do is it depends on the house. There are some houses that I only rent because they have they're kind of a future project. They're on a major freeway or something like that where I'm going to hold them and wait for that to turn into a commercial property, et cetera. But I get into a lot of lease with an option to buy type of a program with a lot of other single family houses.
And you're saying you lease with an option to buy, so the tenant who moves in is actually leasing it, but they might buy it from you later on.
Yep, exactly. So I take a fully rehabbed house that's just been completed, and we market it that way. So what we do is we set up a purchase price of whatever the house is worth. Say it's worth $200,000 as it sits today. So basically, they pay for an option to buy the house. That ranges in price. It can be whatever you want, from $1 to the full purchase price if they so desire, if they want to delay the date for some reason. But what I usually do is on a $200,000 house, I would be probably between $5,000 and $10,000 for the option to buy that house at that price. And then that usually gives them about a 2-year period. It varies. I'm very flexible with most things, which works out very nice for me. But then on top of that, they rent the house for that 2-year period. And any time in that 2-year period, they can get their credit, their mess, get their income up, whatever they need to do to purchase that house from me eventually over that next 2-year period before their option expires. And that's worked out very good for me. It really limits the number of issues I have. I put a pretty high repair number in. So anything typically under like $1,500 is their responsibility to repair.
So while they're living there,
why they live there and why they rent the house, yes, they are responsible for repairs and maintenance and that kind of thing to a point. Mm-hmm. If the furnace goes out, if something major, if the roof needs to get repaired, I'm going to do that. But since I've already gone through the house and repaired all the major fixtures and finishes and everything's been updated, there's not really any major repairs that are going to come up in that 2-year period anyway.
The house is in really good shape.
The house is in great shape. So that helps limit their fear. From that point is the house has basically been rebuilt. Everything's been inspected. It's been approved. We can move forward with this. We know we're not going to have any major repairs. Yeah, something might break, but realistically, everybody you talk to that's gone through, they don't have any issues with the house. All the major points and parts of the house have been fixed and worked great. So it's not a big deal at that point to agree to that portion of the contract, I guess, for them.
So is it harder to find the tenant who wants to do a lease with option to buy? Because you're looking for a very specific type of person.
I am. And kind of like what I said earlier, I kind of target the keeping up with the Joneses crowd. I want the high income earners, high spenders. That's really my target market for that is I rehab and make really nice houses at the end of the day. So I could sell them off to a retail buyer, but instead I head that direction just to keep my cash flow coming in every month. And it's a unique niche, and not many people focus on it. And there's not a ton of people out there that are like that, but there's enough that it works and it makes sense. You've got a lot of people that are high-income earners, but they have 3 cars, they have a boat, they have all of this other personal debt that does not allow them to purchase a home at the time. So what this does is it helps them kind of clear up some of that personal debt, and as long as they don't go into more, they'll be able to buy this house in the next so many years. But at the same time, these houses are in very desirable neighborhoods. They're very nice. You know, it's got to be something they really want and just can't afford today.
Right. And let me see if I understand exactly how this works. So you would market to them.
Yep.
They would say, I'm very interested in living in this house, leasing it from you with an option to buy. And the lease part, is that basically they're paying rent?
Yes.
And the option to buy, they're paying an additional, when they move in, they're paying an additional $5,000 to $10,000 to purchase that option to buy it.
Yes.
At a fixed price that you set.
Yep.
At which they may not pay for 2 to 3 or 4 years.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Correct.
But every month they're still paying you.
They still continue to pay rent. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And is any of that rent going toward paying down what they owe you?
What we do is we normally say, for a lot of stuff we've done recently in the past couple of years, is rent is equivalent to 1% of whatever the purchase price is. So on a $200,000 house, rent would be $2,000 a month. And then on top of that, we add between $200 and $500 a month in that builds up and accumulates in an escrow account for a future down payment. It's a non-refundable escrow account, but it builds up so that after the end of, if it's $200 a month, after the end of 2 years, they've got $2,400 to, put towards that down payment when they actually go and try to buy the house.
So it's almost like they're paying principal down before they actually own the property.
Yeah, to somewhat, yeah. And what it does is for a lot of the houses, a lot of these people have never bought a house before. A lot of them are going to go through an FHA program. So what we're looking at doing on my end is basically I want to build up enough funds in that account so that it covers the 3% they need to get into the house. Is really my target goal on my end. So they can get into basically a 3% down house, but they've already got the 3% built up in an escrow account that I hold, and it sits there.
So they won't be faced with the situation when it does come time to purchase the house where they don't have the down payment.
Exactly.
You have that down payment that they've been paying.
I've got the 3% down payment already essentially for them. They've just got to be able to qualify for the loan.
Now, if they decide after that period of time that they aren't going to purchase the house, what happens to that down payment?
It's a non-refundable escrow account.
So it does not go back to them.
It does not go back to them, unfortunately. And that's part of it. And we've had a lot of people that decide not to buy the house for whatever reason.
What percentage would you say actually goes through with the purchase?
A very small percentage actually go through with the purchase. I think I've had 2 that actually have gone through the purchase out of probably, 30 plus lease options that we've done. So it is a very, very small percentage. It really does. Change. Yeah, I had one this summer. Actually, I had 2 this summer that moved out. One decided they just wanted to move to a nicer area. I mean, it was still a nice house. It was a nicer house in an okay area, and they moved to a nicer area and a nicer house. They cleaned up their mess. They were able to do it. They were one that I thought would buy. They'd moved in from out of state, so it was a good fit for them. They moved in from out of state. They could not qualify because they didn't have a year of performance in their current situation, a year of job history, because since they moved, they didn't want to qualify, the old job for the new type of a thing. They had a little lapse in their employment, et cetera. So, which happened. So I thought it would be a good fit. I thought for sure they would buy it. Late this summer, they called and said, hey, we're going to be moving out. What do we need to do to get out of this? And it wasn't a big deal to get out, and they understood. So that is the part that does happen quite a bit. You don't get a lot of people that end up buying. People with bad credit and bad spending habits usually kind of retain those spending habits and credit issues. And unfortunately, I wish more would buy because it'd be a great deal for me to get rid of some of these houses, but they don't. And And that's kind of the reality of that game. But
while they're paying their rent and the additional amount that goes toward the option to buy, is that showing up on their credit? Like, does that go toward improving if they have bad credit that they're trying to get past? Does that help?
I do not report any of it. I know there's options out there to report various things for their credit, but I currently do not report any of that on their credit report. I probably would help, and if people needed a letter, etc., it would be fine. I wouldn't have any issue helping in that regard. And most of the people that rent, I try to set them up with a mortgage broker that will help them along that path, which gives me a couple different insights. I kind of know where they're at, where they're going. If they do go see him, he can't tell me exactly what's going on, but he can tell me, if it looks like they're going to do something. If they don't go see him, I have no idea anyway. But especially more at the beginning, I wanted to know where they were at, and I wanted to really try to help some of these people get through this, and I wanted to unload some houses. That was the other reason for doing it. So,
and you were, let's go back to kind of when you started this strategy, buying the properties. When you had a job.
Yep.
And you started doing this. Talk about that process of going from a job when you realized, well, maybe I should be buying some properties to where you are now.
Yeah. Really, I was always interested in real estate, and I worked in the heavy civil world. So we did bridges, roads, highways, that kind of stuff. And I was
heavy
civil construction. Yeah, okay. That's what it's technically called.
Were you a civil engineer?
I am a civil engineer by education, okay. If that makes any sense. But I was basically a project manager, so I this is what helped me in the construction side of things. So I oversaw the projects and multiple projects in whole. So we managed our crews that were on the job. I managed all the subs, did all of the approvals for payment, etc., and was in charge of all the work orders, the estimates. I did a lot of that, and it was big dollar amounts. So jumping into the housing side was pretty easy. I'd be on tens of millions of dollars in projects every day, and I'd go and look at $30,000-$50,000 house. So it was a little different ball game for me, when I sit and stare at a pay estimate for $1.5 million, and I go and look at a house that's only, $1,500 or $15,000. It was a little different at the time. So no, that's where I started. And my first real estate deal outside of my personal house was I went to a bankruptcy auction for a builder. And at this auction, it was just a live auction. That's what it was at the time. They had 5 lots for sale, 5 buildable lots. And I bought those 5 lots. I paid $2,500 a piece for them, pretty much sight unseen. I knew where they were. It was in my area. I knew what they were. I had some friends that had built in that neighborhood in the last couple years. And then after I closed on them.
But what year was this?
You're going to be 2006, 7, somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay, so it was when things started going south.
They were still just before. They were still doing pretty well at the time. Is when I got in. So I bought those lots. After I closed on them, I put them up on Craigslist at the time, and I went to go look at them, and a builder had just kind of made an arrangement with the development or the developer to start building houses in there. And I went to the builder and sold all 5 of my lots to him. That's really where I got the funds and the capital to get started.
Flip the lots.
Yeah, I basically flipped the lots. I didn't do anything. It was kind of a wholesale deal, even though I didn't know what that was at the time. But I forget. I think I sold them for about $15,000 a piece to the builder.
Wow, and you bought them for $2,500?
Yeah, and I paid $2,500. So I made some great money there, and that was my first real outside the box, outside the normal W-2 income that I had done. And then I took that money and bought a house and flipped it, and that was the whole thought, is I was going to buy this house and fix it up and sell it, and that's how I got started into it. And it started with one, and then it grew, and pretty soon I was doing a bunch at the same time. And
well, was it the economy that sort of dictated your strategy? Because I'd imagine at that point, if you bought a house in 2007 that you were going to fix up and flip, you probably ran into, well, there's no buyers who are going to purchase it once you finish that.
I didn't run into that problem. I ran into the problem of my accountant telling me to stop selling. I needed to defer my house sales to another year. I needed to get into a long-term capital gains situation.
So you had to wait that 12-month period.
Exactly. Yeah, because I could buy them and fix them and sell them, and that was never a problem. And I understood where the market was and when it was coming down, where it was going to be at, and it was very scary. So you kind of were very careful and cautious, or at least I was at the time. But what had happened is I was making enough money where I was jumping tax brackets, and that's when my accountant really sat me down and say, hey, you've got to start deferring some of these out. You've got to rent them for a year, get into long-term capital gains, And that's
because let's make sure people understand there. So if you buy a house to flip it,
yes,
and you fix it up, flip it in under 12 months,
yes,
you're paying taxes at what?
At my ordinary income level.
At ordinary income level,
which is going to vary. It varies greatly. I forget where the tax brackets actually lie.
I'm no tax expert.
I'm not
it seems
either.
Like it could be up to 30%.
It can be up to almost. At least 35%, 38, I think.
38% of the profit could go right to taxes.
Could go right to
However,
gains.
if you delay that sale,
yes,
like from when you purchase it to when you sell it over 12 months.
Yes, if I own it 12 months in a day, I'm cut from that, say 30% number down to 15.
Down to the capital gains.
Down to the long-term capital gains.
Capital gains have gone up since then, right?
Well, they have,
they're like 20%.
I think 18 or 20. I forget where they're at. I haven't looked this year, but it's
don't take tax advice from us.
We're not CPAs, but it was good advice that I got at the time of, okay, instead of selling this, hold on to it, and quit, because essentially I was giving up 25% of my potential profit to the government. So it was a way to save that money and kind of defer it another year.
So is that when the light bulb went off and you said, I'll do a lease with an option to buy?
And that's where that really came up for me. Because at the time I was buying and holding some rentals as well. And that just turned my philosophy on my rentals of, okay, well, I'll hold this as a rental instead. I know I'll have it for 2 years, and then I'll just get another one to replace it at the time. Is kind of really where I started with that. And then as time goes on, you realize that nobody, or not very many, buy these. So essentially it's a good rental, a very nice rental that will have a 2+ year tenant in it and then turn over. And it'll still be a very nice house when it's all said and done. So
that's where you were, back during the downturn.
Yep.
And take us from that period up to today. I mean, are you still finding those deals out there? Are you still employing this strategy?
Yeah, I still do. I do between 2 and 10 a year is kind of what I tell everybody, houses. And it just depends on how many I sell, how many I keep. And some of them, like I said, I keep because they have a long-term potential of something else. So there's some rentals out there that I have that I will keep and hold till I can do something else with them. But I still do a bunch of the lease options on some of the other ones, and some of them I just sell because it's good to have that capital to keep things going and growing and moving forward. And I've got to sell so many. I'm a little different. I use cash for everything. Which is one of those bad things. So I'm more in line with Dave Ramsey than Robert Kiyosaki. For me, I've got to sell so many so I can buy another rental is really what it amounts to. And it works out well for me, and I've enjoyed it and works well. And there's a ton of security, I feel like, there with that philosophy. So that's why I stick with it.
To be free and clear.
I do. I like to own them outright without paying anybody every month. I've switched that around a little bit lately. There's one deal I did with a landlord that the only way he'd sell them is on a land contract, and the interest rate is extremely low. So I have bought something like that in the recent past, but for the most part, everything is free and clear.
I do want to ask you about your job. So at some point, I think you must have quit your job. Is that correct?
I did. It was over 5 years ago, so it was 2009, I think.
You said, hey, the economy's booming.
Yeah. We're right in the middle of the downturn. Things are awful. No, I was turning houses on the side of working. And we had just put on a very large addition to our house. We added on, I think, like 4,500 square feet to a very small house. So we had built our dream house at that point.
This is you and your wife?
This is me and my wife, yeah. We moved into it in about late August when it was all said and done. I mean, we lived there through the whole process, but we moved in when everything was completed about August. The day before Thanksgiving, we both were up, showered, worked out, went to work, and at work got a phone call from a neighbor that our house was on fire. So we went back home to go see things, and at that point, the house was pretty much fully engulfed in flames. The fire departments were there doing their best. It was unfortunately a very windy day, and I live out in the middle of nowhere, so it's harder to get to. We don't have a fire hydrant nearby, so they're bringing in pump trucks and water, and it was an interesting day, but basically at the end of the day, everything was burned. There was nothing left besides a shell of a basement and a lot of ash and other miscellaneous things around the house. So we had lost all of our worldly possessions that day.
Wow.
It was a very, very humbling experience because, it was just one of those things that you walk away at the end of the day. We went back to my mom's house, stayed in the basement in my old room with nothing except the clothes you wore that day and whatever was in your vehicle.
And your high school varsity jacket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was one of those odd feelings. But during that time with the insurance company, et cetera, we kind of adjusted our life, or at least I did, my lifestyle, my mindset of there's more to life than just this, making as much as you possibly can, working thousands of hours a week. So I really tweaked my mindset at that point. And then a couple months later, I ended up quitting my job. But at that time, I had probably 10, 11, 12 rentals. So my cash flow covered my monthly expense regardless. So we were essentially financially secure. Even if I didn't work, we would be okay. So it was an interesting situation, and that's kind of what ultimately led for the change in lifestyle. Otherwise, I mean, at the time, I worked tons and tons of hours. I mean, I would work 70 to 80 hours a week at least at my job, and then go and walk through houses and do things at night on the weekend. And so it was a good wake-up call for me to, hey, slow down, there's more to life. And that's kind of where I switched gears a little bit and semi-retired and went into this.
Yeah, it's important to note, and I've heard this from other guests on this show, that you built a portfolio while you were working.
Yes.
So that when that income was no longer there, you were at least able to survive on the passive income from your real estate.
Yeah, and that's what we looked at too, is we had enough passive income to get by and we would survive, and we had cash in the bank so I could continue flipping houses. But that is a struggle I've seen others make, is they have just enough to get by and they have no reserve or no cash to, essentially do anything more, and they really struggle. You've got to keep that income there to keep growing. Without that income, you would never grow. If we just flipped a couple houses after 3 or 4, we would have, essentially been destitute at some point. You'd be paycheck to paycheck. I mean, and paychecks don't come until 6 months later. So it's really important to kind of keep that as long as you possibly can bear it. And sometimes I wonder, did I quit too early? Should I have stayed? But I'm glad that I did. I've got a young family. I've been able to do so many more amazing things than I would have ever been able to do while I was working. So it's definitely been the best thing that I could have done for me and my family. So, but you need to keep that income. And I guess that's why I continue to flip houses, is that flipping money helps grow my rental business. That is the income that helps buy more houses every year. That's what, helps me build a portfolio.
So you're flipping a certain percentage of houses in order to generate cash.
Yes.
But then you're also buying and holding
Yep.
another percentage of houses. So break that down. What's the percentage? How do you decide?
It varies. It really does. Some of it varies on the house. Some of it varies on the money in the bank. And some of it varies on the market. Right now in our current market, things are very hard to buy. There's not a ton of great deals out there. But if you find a great deal, they're very easy to sell as long as they're done right. And same thing in the rental market. Rentals are tough to come by right now. There's a ton of renters out there. There's very low vacancy, so it's a good market to be in. But it really varies on a personal level of where I feel I need to be. I like to have a certain dollar amount kind of around in assets, so that I know I can buy a couple if I need to, tomorrow. So it varies quite a bit. And originally my thought was I could flip about 3 to 5 houses depending on what they were, and I could get a paid-for rental without a problem. So now that changes a little bit because I continue to have rental income that comes in and the flip money that comes in. So my flip houses, I can usually do less flip houses to buy a rental now than I used to be able to, just because of the other incomes coming in. So it varies. And I get into some other projects and some other things. I buy farmland. I don't know. I've looked at some development stuff, so it just depends. That's why my buying houses number varies so much year to year. It really just depends on what else comes up at the time.
Yeah, that's another investment strategy that you've told me about that's interesting. Talk about buying farmland and what you're doing with it.
Same thing with the downturn. Property went down. Property value went down. Farmland value was on an upswing when real estate the residential market went down. Many people don't realize that, but the commodity market was stronger than it had been in the past few years as the real estate market dove down. So I am not a true farmer. I grew up in a rural area, but I don't know enough to be a farmer or want to be a farmer. But I've got a brother-in-law that is. I've got another friend that works in that industry as well. And my other brother, we kind of partnered up and started buying some farm ground as stuff came available. It was a great deal. It was a lot of estate stuff originally of, the family's owned a 100-acre farm forever. And the next generation doesn't want anything to do with it. So they'd put it up for sale. And we could buy it, and same thing, we'd add value. We'd go through and we'd clear out tree lines. We'd, adjust the field, the soil, etc., stuff that I don't understand, but the rest of them did. And we could put value back into it. And then instead of renting out the farmland, like most people do, is we would contract out the planting, the spraying, the picking, the harvesting, the shipping, and that kind of stuff. So we held all the risk, and then with that, we got all the reward of it. Versus renting for $100 an acre, we could make, it would depend on the year and what is planted and that type of stuff. But we could make quite a bit more than that just renting it out by taking the risk on. So,
and how's that? Like now that time has passed, is that still a viable strategy? Are you still purchasing farmland?
It can be. The last couple of years were really expensive. We didn't buy a lot in the last couple of years, but right now, what's happened is commodity prices have come down dramatically. Where corn used to be like $7 a bushel is now, I think, like $4. So what that does is it's going to hurt the farmers from buying more land, so it will make it more affordable again. Where it was $7, they could pay a premium for it because they had extra money sitting around. Now they're barely breaking even every year, so the prices on that will come down. So it's going to become more viable again as far as buying some of that stuff up. And we're pretty particular on what we'll buy. We still look at kind of a value add of how can we take this and make it better so that we can resell it. Or there's some particular pieces we've bought that have lake frontage on one side. So long term, will we develop that someday? It really depends. It depends on what's out there and what's available and what we come across and where everybody in that group is at. And that's another issue that's come up in the past. Some have capital, some don't, and we kind of like the group and like the people in it, so we don't want to exclude or do something that not everybody can jump into. So,
sounds like a really interesting niche to be in.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Same thing. We buy stuff close to home, so it's tangible. We can go out there and ride four-wheelers around on the thing. The one that's got a lake on it, we got a little boat out there, so we can go out and go fishing or go play. And it's been a lot of fun. We really enjoy it. It's one of those tangible things. It's an asset you get to play on, you get to use, but it generates a cash flow. The other unique thing about farmland is if you look at it historically, it typically doubles in value every 10 years. So it's got about an 8% appreciation rate. Now with this little downturn in commodities, it's normal, but it still will come back and continue to appreciate. And we've noticed a big swing in that over the last few years. You've seen a lot of I can't think of the groups now. That have a ton of money, the hedge funds, et cetera, start to buy into different farmlands just for that reason, is because it's a good, safe place that normally historically appreciates. It's a very low maintenance aspect. We buy them for both the cash flow and the appreciation, but you can buy them and rent them out, and I mean, it's a zero maintenance type of a gain. So it's a fun thing to do and get into, depending on what you want to do, but what your strategy is. It's more of a long-term strategy for us of we're going to hold on to it for a long period of time, but they're fun. We've toyed with the idea again. We did a golf course before, but there's a golf course for sale. Sorry for the golfers out there, but you can buy a golf course reasonably cheap compared to the amount of ground that it sits on. And you go through and tear out all the trees and the old greens and level everything back out and turn it back into farmland. So that's getting to be a more viable option again as golf courses are doing better. They want more for them, but it's out there. It happens. It's one of those fun things to kind of tweak and play with. Yeah. So
you continue to look for new niches that you can be investing in.
Yeah, we really do. It's not just one thing. I guess I'd kind of like to be somewhat diversified, even though the majority of it's in real estate. There's still that diversification, I think, that helps secure a long-term future where, like I said, the residential market's shooting upward where the farmland market's going down. It's still all real estate, but there's different niches within that perform differently at different times. And I think that's key.
Well, so as we wrap it up, I have two questions that I want to ask you. One is, about this course that you're teaching for the RPOA. Why is it that you would want to do this in the first place? What is it about the RPOA?
I think part of our fire experience and part of life as we've gone on has really been freeing up some time so that I can help others on multiple levels. Our giving has definitely increased, not only monetarily, but as far as time goes as well over the past 5 years since the fire. So there's some of that plays into my mindset a lot of I need to give back more. I am so grateful for all that I have and have had. So that goes back into the equation. And part of it is I have a lot of friends, family, et cetera, that want to do this stuff and they come for advice. And I've seen a few of them make some really bad mistakes and I feel bad for them. And you just can't bail them out. It's one of those learning experiences that you have. But if you can cut through some of those early mistakes of level of finish, what to buy, what not to buy, where to buy, what types of properties to buy, it makes a big difference, and hopefully they'll be more successful in the future. And like I said, I mean, I'm in a very small local market. There's competitors there that buy stuff every day. I see them. I know a lot of them. We stop into each other's houses, have lunch with each other, and it's a fun thing to do. I really enjoy it. The guys that I know are in the market, they really enjoy it too. We have a lot of fun together. And we give each other a hard time about, the junk that they just bought. So it's fun. It's a fun business to be in. There is competition, but I think it's on a different level. So I think teaching a class, some people are like, well, aren't you going to tell everybody your secret? And it's like, there's not really a major secret out there. It's hard work and it's educated, it's an educated risk that I'm willing to take as far as, what I think I can get out of this. Because it is, at the end of the day, it's speculative. You're hoping it sells for X. whatever X is. It's not a guaranteed thing where if I produce this widget, it's going to sell for $5. It's somewhat speculative. There's some risk involved, but it's fun. It's enjoyable. I like it. I love the people that are in it, and I love the people that come up and want to learn more and how to do it, and I like talking to them. So it should be a fun, enjoyable class when it comes around. So yeah, like we said, the first one I think will be in April, and then you just have to stay tuned depending on how it goes.
Awesome. Well, Justin Workman, thank you so much. This has been a great interview.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And I look forward to taking your class.
Sounds great. We'll see you then.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.